Yo, Matt Stars. How's it going? Hope your week is off to a flyer. Cold day here in Melbourne for a Monday, that's for sure. But, obviously, I guess that's what happens when it's wintertime. So I touch base. Wanted to drop a line as we're trying to be a bit more regular here and start to talk a little bit about pain and I guess where that starts to fit in. It's one of the topics that we get a lot of questions about here at Matt, and one of the things that we teach a lot in our Matt Live and Matt Online courses. The online course, which is of course only on its way very, very soon, but you can find out more details about that if you go to the website. But talking about pain and where it fits in, particularly in regards to movement. Obviously, it's a big thing that we're very passionate about, the assessment of movement and how to develop better movement with the people that we work with. And there's a few points I think we have to really talk about and really understand if we're going to get the most out of it, because particularly, I guess, for many of the people that understand pain and pain science, there's been a lot of developments in that field, particularly over the last 5 or so years. There's probably been more developments in how we understand pain in the last 5 years than probably the 500 years preceding, which is great. It's a real field that we're really starting to understand. And often there's maybe some conjecture in, okay, well, if we're really focusing on pain science and how that works, that involves a certain skill set and a certain way of dealing with patients and clients, maybe that is totally devoid of, a movement-based approach. But I think the two go hand in hand. They really complement each other really, really well. And so it's something that we can really start to understand really well and combine, I think, to get really effective results with the people that we work with. But I guess the first thing we need to first define is pain, right? Now, I could sit here and talk about that for the next, 4 hours or so. So we won't do that. But I think, we need to just highlight a little bit of a summary, and that's obviously that the pain experience is a multifactorial experience. Oh, g'day, Sarah. How you going, mate? Nice to see you there. So pain is a multifactorial experience, right? And it's an output from the brain, and it's in response to threat. And that threat could be very, very real, or that could be potential threat. And particularly in those individuals who suffer from chronic pain, often there have been a lot of changes in that misinterpretation of threat, and potentially, that potential for threat is higher than what it should be for whatever reason. And obviously pain is then designed to be really, really helpful, supposed to help us. It's supposed to inspire us, I guess, to take action to remove ourselves from the threat, right? So if you're not all over your pain science definition, make sure you get something down pat, because that's very, very important, particularly when we need to educate and help our patients and our clients understand, which is a big basis for how pain science and utilizing those education-based techniques to help people is, we need to be able to educate and help people understand that with a great definition. So by that definition then, for us as health and fitness professionals, as people who work with people who have pain, then our role is obviously to decrease that threat, right? And help people, because that's often when we see a lot of the people that we work with. They're obviously in pain and they want to be out of pain. Okay, so obviously in an acute phase, in managing an acute injury or something like that, it's usually fairly simple, right? We have to make sure there's adequate tissue healing time, protect things in that stage, and then probably go through a process of trying to return those tissues, to normal capacities, perform some strengthening exercises, help build some things up, make sure that it's all okay, and then people can return to what they like to do. That's the reason why, managing acute injuries is often very easy, and it's good to deal with. Now, unfortunately for a lot of us then, for a lot of the practitioners there, you're going to encounter a lot of people where that isn't the case, right? And they're those chronic pain individuals, those individuals where there is, central sensitization, that type of thing. That's where that process no longer necessarily applies, right? And so what we often need to do then is help these people understand, I guess, pain to try and reduce the threat, right? And that's where we can work on what people think, right? And this is one of the concepts we really kind of drive home in our MAC courses. But the other thing that we can do that often helps there as well is actually work on what people do, right? So one is more a cognitive-based approach. It's dealing with people's levels of education around the concept and the topic, reducing catastrophization, reducing fear through that process. But then the other process is going, okay, well, how can we get you doing things to be able to also address this kind of concept of what you feel, and particularly, I guess, starting to address threat, right? So there's a few ways in which we can do that. One of the processes that we teach in the course, obviously, is being able to try and identify through a strategic framework of assessment as well as investigating what people can do, trying to work with what they can do and finding a great starting point, right? And utilizing that 10-step process to being able to find where that point is, so that then we can gradually start to build and work with people towards what they can't do, right? And so this kind of works in many ways. Now, one of the main things is, of course, trying to build, I guess, capacity for movement for a lot of people, right? And so it's about starting them in a process of identifying where they can perform certain movements so that we can build things like strength, so that we can build maybe some flexibility, so that we can build some endurance, so that we can build some balance and motor control, starting to work with all of those elements that people need, right? That way, if we can build their capacity in general, hopefully we're also going to build some tissue tolerance, and we're going to work in that respect, right? Just working with the anatomical elements and the anatomical structures. But there's another approach to that as well, right? And I think this comes back to this idea of graded exposure, another term that's often used a lot in working with pain, particularly chronic pain, things like that. And it's about being able to gradually build, I guess, that tolerance to certain movements, certain activities, to the way certain things are performed in such a way that, once again, we can start to reduce some of the threat that surrounds that movement, right? Because if a movement, if an activity, if a task is, for whatever reason, being deemed to be threatening, obviously then that's going to create that pain experience. So, but by performing that task in a way that is safe, in a way that's controlled, in a way that actually is enjoyable for a person as well, what we can start to do is reduce the threat that surrounds that, because nothing bad's happening. We're in an environment that that person is succeeding in, and therefore then we start to, I guess, break up the habit that often a lot of these people are in their fear and their I guess that subconscious threat that surrounds that activity. So that's the way in which graded exposure can become a really, really important part of managing the people that we work with that have or do suffer from chronic pain. So this process, right, needs to be two-pronged, okay? So we work with individuals from an education standpoint. We need to have great explanations for pain, how that works, helping people understand their condition, helping people feel at ease with the plan and the process and the time frames that are involved, helping people work towards their goal, building people up, emotionally and as well as mentally, I guess, as well. But then as well, taking an active and exercise-based approach often to build some of those other elements. So building their capacity, building their tolerance to movement, building their movement skill, the variability, the variety of movements that they can perform. And if we take that two-pronged approach, we can imagine, right, if you have good strength, endurance, power, balance, control, range of motion, you've been working on certain movements, you're feeling comfortable with them in a safe way, you've, got some momentum behind you in terms of your confidence with how you're performing movements as well, and you're enjoying it, usually in a happy and safe environment, well then guess what? There's not going to be much of a threat anymore. right? We start to remove threat in that circumstance. And if we're removing threat, right, and we're making people feel safe in particular, right, developing safety in them, well then there is no threat. Therefore, then there shouldn't be any pain, or we're at least reducing it in many ways. So that's one of the processes that we teach at MAT, and particularly in our MAT Live and our MAT online courses that we've been running now for a while, and we've got thousands of therapists obviously around the world applying some of those techniques. So I thought I'd drop a line. Wanted to see your thoughts as well and share that with you. Obviously, the end of a busy day here in the MAT lab for me. So if you've got any other thoughts on that, or if you've got any comments on that, I'd love to hear them, because obviously it's a pretty busy topic. It's one that is developing all the time, and I think one that we can continue to develop upon and improve even more in the near future. I mean, it would be probably a topic that will have even more new ideas in the next 5 years than the 500 years before that as well. All right, guys, that's it for me. Hope you've had a great Monday and a great rest of your week, and we will touch base soon.